Good evening. I'm Corvallis Advocate Assistant Editor Emily Ratcliffe, and co-moderating with me tonight is publisher Steve Schultz, who also serves as president of the City Club of Corvallis. Welcome to tonight's CitySpeak Forum. These forums are co-presented by the Corvallis Advocate and the City Club of Corvallis. The Advocate offers fresh news daily online, these town hall meetings, and just recently brought back the same broadly ranging weekly events calendar it had been publishing before the pandemic. Our co-presenter, the City Club of Corvallis, is a volunteer-run nonprofit organization that seeks to present a diversity of viewpoints and constructive dialogue. If you, as a viewer, have questions for our guests, we welcome you to comment on our Facebook posting of the Livestream event or to email us at cityspeak@corvallisadvocate.com. Again, that's cityspeak@corvallisadvocate.com. Steve?
Thanks, Emily. Partial funding for these forums come from Peak Sports and First Alternative Natural Foods Co-op. However, we could not present CitySpeak without support from viewers like you. Please consider a subscription. Visit our site. Levels are $5 or $10. Donations over and above are welcome. Folks, locally run news outlets like the Corvallis Advocate have become increasingly rare, and community members willing to sustain them are rarer still. So for those that are sustaining us, we are incredibly grateful for your support. It's not just the dollars, frankly, it's also kind of vindication that like all the effort's worth it. We really appreciate it because the days are long and we just love it when you help us out. So for those of you supporting us, we really do feel it. If you're not a subscriber yet, please do consider joining the group of people that are. And again, thanks to everybody that does support us. Emily.
Thanks, Steve. So before we start this evening's program, we want to share a quick note about our next City Speak. It will be focused on OSU's forests. We'll be speaking with OSU's forestry leadership about the past, present, and future of the forest on Tuesday, June 7th at 6:30 p.m. Notably, beyond our local forests, the university just took over management of the Elliott State Forest as well. So if you have questions for the university, let us know what those are. And tonight, we talk with Morgan Orr, owner of the Brass Monkey, Greg Little, owner of Squirrel's Tavern, and Michelle Colombe, a journalist who covers the restaurant industry. Colombe is based in Corvallis and founded Corvallis Culinary Connections. Evan Deffenbacher, the general manager of Castor, was also originally scheduled for this evening, but he reports that a number of his staff had tested positive for COVID, and he will be getting tested as well. So, getting into our first question, we'll dive into bars and restaurants as an industry in a few minutes, but first, let's start with Morgan. So Morgan, you own the Brass Monkey. Would you mind sharing some of your personal experiences? There are, of course, easier and surer ways to make a living. So what is it about working in restaurants and bars that you love? And what are some of the hardest things about it?
That is a great question, Emily. Man, I honestly moved back to town about 10 years ago to go to grad school because I didn't know what I was doing with my life. I got a bartending job with Cloud Davidson when it was still Cloud and Kelly's Public House. He had just turned into Cloud and Kelly's Public House from Cloud 9. And sometime along my tenure there, I realized or admitted to myself that, this is a real job. I mean, I can save money. I have a flexible schedule. Between the time I've been in the service industry since I was 14 working at Dairy Queen. And for the 15 years after that, I was out of the country every other year. I've gotten to live in different places in the world. And I bartended on the coast in Kenya with my feet in the sand once. It's extremely portable. And at some point I did realize that it is a real job. And there's something about this town that chose me as well. And I don't really know how to describe that, but partway through working with Cloud for 8 years, I fell in love, got married, got pregnant. I was waitressing until 48 hours before I went into labor. And then when I came back, Cloud had me doing administrative things for his 5 restaurants at the time. And I got to put my kid for a nap on the office on the office couch in the basement of Bombs Away and, do payroll and things like that. And I swear it feels at this point almost luxurious that I make my own schedule, that I get to pick my kid up from school and things like that. Um, you're right, it's not the best way to make money. Don't buy a restaurant if you don't just love it. Like I, it's been a long couple of years. It didn't really catch up to us until like the last couple months with like the staffing shortages and things. But I was, lamenting to my husband the other night, like if I'm stressed out, at least I'm stressed out about something I love to do. I absolutely love to do it. And I don't know if that fully answered the question, but it's just about loving to do it and about how this community chose me. I have watched people fall in love, get married, have babies, and we're all just here together. Like we like to say we're Corvallis' downtown living room, and it's sort of a joke, but that's how it feels. And like I like that welcoming place, and it's an absolute like honor and privilege to like share this with the community. And I hope that answered the question because I don't know how I got here. I truly don't. Maybe a year before I bought the place, when people asked me if I was going to take over Cloud and Kelly's one day, my answer was hell no. I am a great right hand. I don't want the stress of being the owner, but then, we all have a midlife crisis and sometimes you buy a bar. So
Yeah, thank you, Morgan. Greg, what about you? What is it about working in restaurants and bars that you love, and what are some of the hardest things about it? Um, and why do you keep doing it despite the fact that there are maybe easier and more definite ways to make a living?
I guess once we get there, I'll just stay in your truck if we could turn the light on. But I'm not speaking right now.
Is that Michelle?
Oh, sorry. I thought I was muted.
Oh, that's good. My thing is, I've been doing it now since, I started when I was 21 and started Squirrels when I was 23. And now I'm finally getting to a spot where I've got 2 more years and Squirrels will be 50. So that's kind of my big thing right now is I want to hit 50. Truthfully, when I turned 70, I thought that I would be getting out of the business. And, but as Morgan said, when you love something and you just kind of keep doing it, it's something that becomes a passion. And the community part of it for me always was very positive. And I grew up, running around the streets here, and it just became something that you just kind of keep doing. And so, like I said, I'll keep doing it now. I definitely have a goal. I got a couple more years for the big number, and I want to see if I can get that far. And so that's kind of where I'm at as far as the business part of it goes. And as Morgan said, also, we're going through these transitions of personnel and trying to keep everybody working, and also keep supporting the staff part of it. So that's been really interesting. And then we're also going through a thing right now with the COVID thing that, you're working for, a few months, and then all of a sudden you get 4 or 5 staff members that get COVID and you got to shut down for 5 days. And it's like you kind of have the wind taken out of your sail, and you're just we're in this process that we haven't come through that yet. We're in 2 years into this thing, and with mandated things going on in the early days, and now it's because people keep getting sick. And so you just have to kind of work with the staff and do the best you can. And if you don't have the staff, then you just got to shut the doors for a little while, and then you go from there. And so we're kind of in that phase right now. So we just came out of it a couple weeks ago, and where we had to shut down for 5 days because we had, 6 people, 7 people that we kind of knew that all came down with it. 4 of them were staff members, and it all generated from the tavern. So anyway, so that's kind of, we're in this very interesting time of life, I think, right now, as far as a business goes, that we're all trying to adjust and make that thing, keep going. And so we just kind of keep going. And like I said, sometimes you got to close the doors for a little while and let everybody get healthy and then get back at it. And I think we're going to be in that phase for a little while. So it's just the time of our lives right now. So.
Well, thanks. Yeah. And Michelle, of course, you're a journalist covering the restaurant industry. Could you share what drives your passion about food and restaurants? And could you explain a little bit about the group that you founded, the Corvallis Culinary Connections?
Yeah, so sorry for both the delay, and I'm going to just leave the video off for the moment because I'm on basically a kind of a country road in Austin, Texas right now. And my bag got lost. So anyway, so yes, I studied journalism and have always been interested in being a storyteller. And I ended up being led into the spirits and hospitality industry through the United States Bartenders Guild, which is one of the organizations I actually write for. So I was traveling a lot, and then the pandemic happened. And at that moment, not only did I have to put my life on hold, but I also had to think about the bars and restaurants in Corvallis. A lot of them are my friends. I mean, the people on this call are my friends. And I was like, holy crap, what are we going to do? And at the moment of confusion, when nobody knew who was open, there wasn't a resource. So I thought, you know what, I could put my skills as a writer and social media and put something together that just made it easier to streamline the information, because information is key, communication is key, and restaurants are key. They're part of our community. They are where people come together to get married. They come to celebrate. They come to sometimes have even first dates or grieving moments. So I just felt it's such a value to our community to have the restaurant survive, and I just did what I could to help see that through, I hope.
Thank you, Michelle. And, no worries about the delay, and yeah, we all understand here. Moving on to experiences with guests. Let's see here. Could you share some experiences you've had with guests that have been especially hard or fulfilling, difficult, or inspiring? Greg, let's start with you.
You mean like during the pandemic kind of things, as far as, are you talking about guests? I mean, customers and the way the business runs, or?
Yes, yeah. And it can be, yeah, before the pandemic, during, just in general.
Well, I mean, to me, I felt like we all kind of grew up together. Like I said, I was in my 20s. And so, for me personally, we were coming out of Vietnam, out of the war, and we had a lot of displaced soldiers that were coming in and re-entering the community. They were coming back to school to get re-educated and move on with their lives. And a lot of them had some very dysfunctional energy levels going on. So we had to work through a lot of that. People were very, to me at the time in the 70s there, it was, and into the 80s, they were very dysfunctional. And so it was something you all had to work through together. And the bars were definitely, like Michelle said, it was a gathering spot for life and love and grief. And all that. And so everybody had to work um, on kind of growing together and overcoming all the energy that had come out of a war, and moving on to a new structure, a new growth end of things. And so, yeah, I mean, you physically had to be present and work with people. And you in working in a bar, you have a lot of one-on-one with people, and there's a lot of stuff going on that you don't necessarily know, but you have to kind of adjust to it, and 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 move forward with it. So you always try and be positive in your direction, and but you do have to, like I said, be one-on-one. I mean, you got to interact with people and find out what's going on, and you're not just somebody serving somebody a beer. You end up, talking to people, and you get to know them. And just like Michelle said, also, that's a friendship thing. There's a lot of that going on, and with Morgan too, and in her finding and working through the businesses with cloud and stuff. She found a direction that she wanted to go, and it's it's just something that you do and you interact, but it's part of your life. I mean, people are going through marriages, they're going through divorces, they're going through kids. It's just like we're all living this life at the same time, and so you just have to kind of do the best you can and keep moving forward. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And Morgan, any particularly challenging, fulfilling, difficult experiences that you've had with customers?
Yeah, with customers in particular, the funny thing is, like, my tenure as an owner, I had 1 year before COVID, and I've had 2 years in COVID. So everything I thought I learned in my like tenure with cloud and those restaurants, the patterns and things mean nothing now, basically. Um, and yeah, I feel like we're all echoing each other, but we are just comrades. Like Greg's a god. Greg's like my godfather of some kind, because he's the mentor to my mentor, and it's a very interesting thing to be a part of, like, this town changing and growing and everything, especially post COVID. Um, yeah, we kind of touched on how, you kind of watch people have a date, and then they're getting they get married, and then like they're pregnant, and now the kid's 5 years old, and it is very much the personal connection thing that I love about this job, and that is very much what keeps me going. And I would say that COVID has done a strange thing. At first, none of us knew how to act, like in the beginning of that, and wearing masks and plexiglass and all of that nonsense. I like don't even want to remember. But I'll tell you on this, like vaguely the other side of it, like Greg says, we're not all out of it. We've had a couple people go down with illness. You all have seen the sign on our door that's like, short staff today. Sorry, we closed early. But the human connection, this town turned out for us. Like, my staff went through a lot. We got our PPP and all that. But this town turned out for us so hard. Oh, did you see that huge fly? Holy cow. It's bugging the crap out of me. This town turned out for us in a way that is like family. And something that struck me recently is that post COVID here, customers are patient and gracious like they've never been. We all realized what we were missing when we couldn't go out. And we have counter service. So sometimes there's 3 people in line, sometimes there's literally a line out the door, and people are just willing to wait. Last night, Sugar Jay's next door was also closed, and we didn't realize till it already happened that those tables were full. And we had like hour-long ticket times. And I think like one person complained maybe through the whole night. Nobody else is open on Mondays, so they're just happy we're there. And people have really like been grateful and saying, hey, I see you guys working really hard. Thank you for being here. And that has just really kind of like rejuvenated us or something at this point, with the post COVID. And then before that, like, you know, studies show that money doesn't buy happiness. The one thing that truly makes us happy is human connection. And we get that every day. And it's not always happy. And it's like Greg said, like we're therapists of a sort almost, like we are here, we're constant. And when you had a long night and you don't want to make dinner, we're here for that too. And, we've had weddings and wakes and everything in between my cloud days and these days and my days at bartending in Portland and stuff like that. Like, I mean, the customers are what do it for me. I mean, making drinks and stuff is fun, coming up with new recipes and whatnot, but the human interaction is, good or bad, that is what life's about. And
Yeah, I think,
yeah.
well, thank you. I
Yeah.
think moving on to Michelle, with your own, Michelle, what have your own standard experiences been? What are experiences that have been fulfilling, inspiring, or difficult in your own lived experiences with restaurants?
So aside from starting Corvallis Culinary Connections, actually before that, my husband and I were one of the early food trucks in Corvallis. We own Corvallis Creperie du Lys, and we're at the farmer's market. We had the cart for about 10 years. I also currently work in the mornings a few days a week for Starbucks, so it's more of the corporate restaurant approach, but I still have my experiences. And as far as like in more recent years, like when you have customers that, like what Morgan was saying, they're grateful you're open. They say, thank you for being here. Acknowledgement. And when I chose the name for Corvallis Culinary Connections, all three of those words were very important to me, but mainly the word connections. We connect so much over food, like no matter where you go and when you travel, and I travel quite a bit again, thank you. I'm so grateful. People always welcome you with food or beverage. It's just such a bonding agent. It's like the glue in the conversation. And fun story, actually, Cloud married my husband and I in the Cloud and Kelly's former location. Just the two of us at the bar with our best friends. That was our wedding. And then our wedding reception was actually where Morgan's restaurant currently is, the Brass Monkey. We rented it on a day they were closed, and we had all our family and friends, and they, made a menu for us. And it's like, yeah, restaurants really matter. And I go out obviously quite a bit, and I try to communicate with people when they're like, well, why don't they have that menu item I love so much? And so I will be that voice to explain to people about shortages in inventory and maybe shortages on staff. And it's going to take us a little longer, but we're going to be grateful because dining out is a privilege. That's all I have to say on that. I hope I answered the question.
Thank you, Michelle. Yes. And then Greg, you've been a longtime restaurant owner, of course. Could you tell us about how, or could you tell us about your bar and how long you've been operating, and unwrap for viewers the way the pandemic impacted your business? So in other words, what's worked for Squirrels over the pandemic and what have the challenges been?
I think the biggest thing, like I said, for me has been community. People have definitely supported us, like Morgan was talking about, that people have come out of the woodwork, so to speak. And I mean, some people we didn't during the pandemic, you didn't see them for almost 2 years. So, but they were part of the early fabric of the tavern, and they stuck with you, and they kept coming back, and they would help support. We had right in the beginning, we had a number of people that donated money to the employees so that they had a little extra, because they didn't have tips coming in. And I mean, we shut down for the first 4 months after the pandemic, and we actually used it as a time to do a little remodel in our kitchen and get it up and running. But at the same time, that was kind of a rough time, and everybody pitched in, and they did a GoFundMe and kind of kept us going that way. And then, like I said, some people just donated outright and gave money for employees so that it would be passed on. And it's just, I think that the community part of it, like I said, I was 23, and we did a lot of community stuff with the Parks and Rec department. And that kind of gave us a foundation within the community, because we were playing softball and volleyball and basketball and soccer. And I mean, we just had lots of people that were doing activity in the community. And, and then over the years, we've all, the businesses have gotten together and worked with the police department, worked with the fire department, and you work with the community leaders and community partnership things that go on, and that really has given us a great foundation, and that carried through. And as Morgan said, the PPP money, if that hadn't come through, I mean, that got us through like 6 months in 2020, and then 2021, the second round of PPP money has gotten us through the next year. And like I said, when you're not sure if you're going to be open or closed because your personnel is sick, you still got to try and pay them. And that was partly what was going on with that money, that it allowed us to pay the payroll and keep employees employed, even though you weren't operating the business. So it's been, I keep coming back to the community part of it. It's been the very positive thing that's kept us going. So there you go. I'm going to stop with that. So.
Oh, thank you, Greg. And then, so Morgan, what has worked for the Brass Monkey over the pandemic, and what have the challenges been for you?
That's a great question. My wonderful landlord will probably be embarrassed, but I'm going to say David Livingston of Marysville Properties. The very beginning, before any of that PPP came in, he was so generous and so gracious. I would not be here without him, because I wouldn't even have made it to the PPP money at that point. I also hate to say that, like, I think we found out on I don't remember if we found out on a Tuesday that we're shutting down Friday, or Friday that we're shutting down on a Tuesday, but we had like 48 hours. I laid off my staff the day we found out. I was like, you guys go sign up for your unemployment. If you want to volunteer for the next 2 days before we're shut down or whatever, fine, but you're all fired. Go do that. And I'll probably almost cry. Like, we're nothing without our employees. The community doesn't have anywhere to come if we don't have people cooking and bartending. And that PPP and everything, like, we are here because of it. I would not be here without it. I really don't think, or we would have just straight shut down for a year and tried to hold on. But again, without David Livingston, his generosity, that wouldn't have mattered either. And we teamed up with Two Towns early pandemic for like some meal kit takeout stuff. That absolutely cost us money, but in the end, it kept people remembering that we were here. And then we did kind of what Greg did. I employed people. We used some of that early PPP to, like, obviously to be open for a few days a week, doing some takeout. We had one customer on our first anniversary, literally one takeout order. And then, we wound up tearing apart the bar. We did some stuff back in the kitchen. And instead of paying people to bartend, I paid my employees to do manual labor, or what, all those things you don't get to when you can't shut the place down. And so that was good. And then, I mean, when we had the capacity percentages, 25% capacity in the Brass Monkey is 13 people. And that was supposed to include your staff. And so then God bless the city of Corvallis for doing what they did and getting together for all that outdoor seating and stuff. Like everything that the powers that be did. I mean, even my personal mortgage at my house, the way they let you do forbearance and all that, like it was scary at first, but all that stuff came together. And the stuff we did during the pandemic, being open for small days or doing some of that takeout or those to-go meals, it was about, like Greg said, paying people to be there, like I laid off my friends, man. I laid off my friends. And then to just be able to, yeah, like still provide for their families and things, at least to some small extent, was a giant blessing. But it all had to do with the programs. Hey, Michelle.
Thank you.
She's out of the truck.
Yeah.
Oh my God. One last thing. Corvallis Culinary Connections. I cannot say enough about, here I go, I'm gonna cry again, about what Michelle did for us. Like she said, she was OG service industry. She did it because she cares. And she had a great idea because the very original of it was like, hey, post here, tell us who's open, tell us what their menu looks like, shoot a photo of what you got or of who's doing deliveries and all that. And that was so huge for Corvallis restaurants, so indescribably huge. No, if we're like, the money and the outdoor things, like nobody else did that for us in that way. That was just absolutely inspired. And I love you, Michelle. No one else can see her, but I can see her right now, and I love you.
Well, we'll get to see her right now. Thank you, Morgan. And Michelle, there's been general discussion that any number of the challenges that arose during the pandemic were also issues beforehand, whether they were acknowledged or not. To what extent was that the case in the restaurant and bar industry? What are some of the issues, and how is the industry doing with those challenges?
Well, that's a really big question. I'm sorry, can you kind of rephrase that or say that again?
Sure, yeah, it's people sometimes talk about issues that emerged from the pandemic were also issues even before the pandemic. And to what extent do you think that is really the case in the restaurant and bar industry? What are some of those issues, and how is it doing with those issues?
I think some of the issues, in my opinion, probably are still there as far as for the restaurants is margin. I mean, I don't think people grasp how small the profit margin is for a restaurant. And they make a little bit more profit if they serve alcohol, but then there's an expense and a liability that comes with that. So that's always been there. But I think that during the pandemic, when the whole cocktails to go issue surfaced, that's when the discussion started. Like, why would that matter to a bar and restaurant? It's like, well, that's where they make a larger profit margin. And so their existence and survival would depend on alcohol sales if that's the type of restaurant or bar, restaurant they are. Oregon being a controlled state, that's a whole, I won't get into all of that, but why that also adds to the issue. I think Oregon finally making cocktails to go was a really good move forward. I think that if people are responsible enough to go to 7-Eleven and buy a 6-pack of beer and not drink it in their car, I think they also will go to a restaurant, get their cocktail to go, and wait till they get home. So that I never had a concern that was going to be a problem. But I think making cocktails to go seems to me where I saw a problem before, it arose during, and a solution came after. I don't personally, I will add that I am an investor. I'm a silent partner in a restaurant in Portland. So I do have some knowledge of some of this stuff we're talking about, but not as much, obviously, as Morgan and Greg do.
Well, thank you, Michelle. Well, then, Morgan, what's your feedback on this? What were some of the issues that people say arose during the pandemic that were actually already issues before the pandemic? And how do you think the industry is doing to meet those issues?
Yeah, let's see. I like what Michelle said about the cocktails. I kind of forgot that was something that we always had thought would not be a big deal, and it was cool for there to be a reason to like look into that, right? And to look for the state of Oregon to actually be like, oh, well, like, yeah, maybe that will be fine, you know? And I tell you, they sure as heck just like switched our, like our qualifications and stuff. I mean, we basically instantly, you sent an email and sent back, it's like, okay, here's your temporary permit. You're good to do it. And we'll review your actual, you know, application when we get to it. But the other like small things I thought about were things like the like our staffing issues, and then cost of goods, ability to get those goods in a timely manner. If we can't get the goods we asked for, like what else have you got like that's close? That was really exacerbated, especially for those of us that like really like to use local stuff. Like we don't use Cisco, we don't use Columbia Distributing. We try to use like Van Vliet, who's based in Albany. I use a couple of the smaller beer distributors, and pretty much everything we get is just, there's so much incredible beer in Oregon. I like almost don't have to look any further. So some of those issues of like getting things in on time, getting what you want, having an actual selection to choose from was exacerbated. We're not quite there on the solutions yet. It's kind of getting better, but still, like if we order, you know, we've got a lamb burger on. We ordered 5-pound packs of ground lamb. Well, we got 35 1-pound packs instead. Fine, it's lamb, I'll take it. You know, those kind of things. You know, maybe the margin, I don't know, I can see Michelle laughing down there. The margins are not as good on things like that, but that's just the rolling with the punches has always been a thing. But yeah, that's exacerbated as well. We didn't really have the staffing issue until just recently, because we held on to our really amazing staff because of the PPP and everything. But it's almost like we're coming out of the other side. I mean, so generic, but like we're coming out of the other side stronger and better because we've learned to roll with the punches. We've you can kind of see ahead of, not really see ahead of it, but having experienced those challenges, maybe you kind of have more ideas on how to deal with them when they come up. I thought of something else while Michelle was talking that I forgot now, but oh man, another strange thing that came up. Nobody uses cash. Everybody uses debit cards. I do not make cash deposits anymore. I have to pull cash out of the bank so that the bartenders can get the tips that y'all write in so graciously on the tip sheet. And then that's just different for my costs, for taxes, for all of that. Like, yeah, patterns and stuff that used to come with different seasons, or like Memorial Day weekend's coming up. Is everyone staying home because that's what we do now? Or is everyone finally going to go out and go camping? Are we going to be just get annihilated all weekend? Or is the town going to be crickets? We just don't know. And we're going to wait and see, and we'll overstaff and then send people home if it's not busy. But yeah, I can't, I feel like there was one other little point that if I remember, I'll wave, but yeah, the small thing. Oh, and like staffing, man. We work really hard. We love what we do, but we lose our marbles pretty consistently, and we're just not coming back. Or people that all got laid off for months on end had to go find other jobs, and now they've got, you know, maybe benefits or a real job or something like that, more stable than what we do, and they're just not coming back. The OGs are gone, and then we've got a bunch of students, but the in-betweeners are more far between for sure.
Thank you. And then Greg, what about you?
On those similar lines, one of the biggest things I think we found was for the business part of it, the food ended up becoming such a bigger part of the business, especially to go and for in-house. But as Morgan was talking about, when you're reduced in size and you've got plexiglass up on the bar, you lose that personal interaction that happens between the customer and the employees, and the bar, just in general, just creating the atmosphere, so to speak. And so the food now has become the bigger predominant as opposed to the alcohol before. And you don't make as much money on the food. I mean, the alcohol is kind of where you made your money, and you could kind of give away the food because you always have the alcohol to fall back on. But now when you're into the food part being your main income, you got to adjust. And like Morgan was saying as well, you know, the supply chain got disrupted, the costs went up, all that stuff was going on. And so for me, I had to readjust the way that I handled the business, and I'm still in an adjustment stage. You know, we raised our prices here last October, and my feeling is I need to raise them again. And, you know, I've read about other people that don't change the menus now. They just use stickers and they put it on the menu because the prices have changed so much so frequently that they had to, you know, adjust so rapidly because everything changed so much. And and again, as Morgan said, it's just like you know, you try and get a certain brand, and then all of a sudden you can't get it. So then you said, well, what's close to that? How do you get the next phase of it? And you know, you go to a big store and and the shelves are bare, and it's like, well, so what's coming on? I mean, even the big guys aren't getting the shipments, and so you're working on that part of it. And it's definitely an adjustment that way. So and like I said, we've downsized our hours. Instead of being open till 1 or 1:30 in the morning, we're shutting down at 11 or 12 now. And it's just because the food now, like I said, has become the predominant. And we haven't had an alcohol day larger than our food day in over 2 years. And for us, that's been pretty interesting to see, because I never had that before. It was always the alcohol that was the predominant. And we always had fun with the food. We always enjoyed what we did with it, but it was never our money maker. And so now we've had to kind of raise our prices to get things back up to even keel. And also, you know, you're hiring your personnel at a lot higher rate than you're definitely not paying minimum wage anymore. You have to pay a higher amount to keep your people there. And a compression wage thing is happening where, you know, you have everybody used to start them out at minimum wage, and you had your people that had been around for a long time, and you were able to pay them more. And now you start everybody at such a higher rate that the people that have been around a longer time aren't getting the benefit of the fact that they've been there for a length of time, and you're having to figure out how to adjust for them and try and get them a little bit higher at the same time, starting everybody out at a certain, you know, 14 or 15 an hour kind of thing now, where it used to be 12.50. And all of a sudden, you know, you've got a big, your gap isn't as big. You don't have as much cushion for employees that have been there for a long time and have been putting in the time and so on. So, so that's been another interesting part. But and like I said, the biggest part for me too is the cost of food, and how you pass that along to your customers, and getting the product out and having the personnel to put the product out. And so that's been the biggest adjustment for me. So
Thank you, Greg.
mhm.
And then final question on my end is, what are some of the challenges and opportunities that are unique to bars and restaurants in the Corvallis market? And do you have a sense of how the local market might develop in the coming years? Morgan, let's start with you.
Like the market for just our restaurants in general, and how
Restaurants in Corvallis.
Or yeah, in Corvallis. You know, yeah, I feel like we're already seeing it, like with what Greg said about the liquor. I'm kind of surprised that didn't come to mind, because yeah, we used to be a pub and now we're a restaurant, and that's what the community asked for. So it's what we're doing. But all those things about labor costs and the liquor versus food, or like Michelle said, then again, like the margins for both are already super tiny. Liquor is the only way you really get through, and there's not that late night stuff. I'm very curious to see if it stays on a trend of restaurants are busy and bars are more not like few and far between. But I don't know if like our late night stuff, past 11 p.m. on any night, we don't really. There's a few stragglers, there's a few people that'll wander in, but we used to be wall to wall full from 10 to 2, Friday, Saturday at least. And that just doesn't exist. And so I really wonder the further we get out of COVID if that will come back or not. I am starting. I really don't. I don't see it so much in Corvallis. I almost don't expect it to come back. And like Greg said, we're pivoting and trying to figure out how to make a restaurant work as opposed to a bar. Like, wow, we used to be more like, I don't know, for lack of a better guess, 60-40 liquor and food. At least when it was just me, when we had the Cloud and Kelly side and the Downward Dog side, Downward Dog was like almost all liquor, at least 75% probably. And then we were a little heavier to the liquor, and now it is just, yeah, it feels like all food, which again has no margins. We do want to pay people better because no one's ever been paid a living wage in our industry before, and we're barely eking towards there. But then you start raising the prices because you have no choice, and at some point you're just pricing out your own customers. So I really wish I had a prediction. At this point, I kind of feel like the restaurants are more in demand than the bar stuff. And again, I don't know if that maybe also is like kind of a generational change, because people try to say millennials are killing fabric softener and stuff that we like quote unquote don't need anymore, and there's a lot of YouTube videos on how to make a cocktail, and you can come pick up your cocktails and take them away, or eat and drink at home, which also all of us having lacked real wages and stuff for 2 years are having to be more frugal. And maybe a little ways out, we'll all get our feet under us, just as a bunch of people with jobs and lives and families and stuff, and have a little more disposable income and time to go out late and drink again. But I really hope a few more places pop up in Corvallis, and that there's a climate for new places to emerge, because I feel like we had to have lost probably a third of our restaurants in Corvallis. Maybe Michelle could give us a better number, but we lost a good chunk. And so again, like on a crazy Monday night, we pick up the slack, but we got pretty annihilated. And you just want to provide a good experience, not make people wait an hour for mac and cheese. So
Yeah, no, thank you, Morgan. Greg, what are your thoughts on this?
Kind of on that same level. I think we're still in that adjustment stage, but going forward, I think that we'll stay. I think the food's going to end up being a mainstay now, and we're just going to have to be aware of that. And the other part is, you have to increase your food staff to be able to get the product out to satisfy the customers. At the same time, as Morgan also said, the city coming through with the outside seating has helped us immensely. If we didn't have that, especially in the early year of the COVID, it would have been a big struggle. So, and now we have at least till October 31st in the city to keep our outside seating. And I'm really excited for that. I think it'll be a very positive summer. I think people will utilize the outside. And, we've had to also adjust. We were serving outside a lot. Now we're having everybody come in. So anyway, it's it's getting good. It feels like it's healthier, and it's more consistent than it was. And it feels like we're moving in the right direction. And people are still coming out, just they're not staying out as late. And, maybe that's just the way it works, so you just kind of gotta go with the flow a little bit and figure out what's happening, and kind of make the adjustments. So there you go.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. And Michelle, your thoughts?
So I think if I understood the question originally, you were saying what makes Corvallis unique. So I grew up in Corvallis, and I mean, I'm in my 50s now, so I've lived here the majority of my life. And what's unique about Corvallis, at least up until the pandemic, was the fact that our economy seemed to revolve around the university. So, the summers were quieter in a lot of ways, aside from an occasional athletic event of high school kids or whatever, or some conference or convention going on. And I don't have the information as far as if those types of conferences have returned for the summer. But it used to be that the townies, people like me who grew up here, waited until summer when all the students left to then go dine on Monroe, because we were no longer in fear of running over a student who's not looking at where they're going because they're on their cell phone or whatever. So Corvallis is kind of unique in that way. We're also, I think, very focused on eating local, supporting the farmers market, supporting our local beverages, whether it's Block 15 for beer or one of our local distilleries. We do have a few. So that was, I think, the basis of your question was about what's unique about Corvallis, right?
Well, and maybe what are some other challenges and opportunities that are unique to the restaurant industry in Corvallis, and how that market might develop in the coming years?
So for me personally, being mainly, among other things, a food cart advocate. So currently in Corvallis, we allow food carts to vend more than 45 days, only in the downtown and the riverfront area. And I spent 3 years of my life 10 years ago making that part happen. So we are lucky to have common fields in our existence now, I feel like, because of some hard work that me and other people did. What I think needs to happen from my perspective is that needs to be expanded outside of the downtown area into other areas of Corvallis, whether it be on 9th Street or Southtown or other places. I would like to see more opportunity for food carts or food trucks to happen. They are typically owned by minorities. And I think that more opportunities in Corvallis for minority-owned businesses is of great value.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you all. I will now hand it off to Steve.
Well, thank you, Emily. And we have a lot of questions from viewers, and it's my job to ask those for you. Okay, and actually on this one, I'm going to, in fact, move to Michelle first, because I think you'll have a broader range of experience with this. So a number of viewers want to know, what is the deal with delivery apps for the industry? How's that changing the industry? What do most restaurants think of them, and can a restaurant actually really opt out? And Michelle, I'm going to turn that over to you.
So the dilemma overall, and maybe not just Corvallis, but with third-party delivery apps, is when you break it all down, the driver isn't really making any money, and the restaurant is definitely not making any money. Who's making the money is the app service itself, whether it be, there's a lot of them out there. I think I personally try to order from restaurants that have their own in-house delivery, and I'll usually ask because I would like to see the money actually go to the restaurant. And I don't mind paying the driver or tipping a driver really well, but the third party, yes, they're a business model, but I don't think that during the pandemic, while it served its purpose, I don't think the restaurants, and that part I can't answer, but I don't think it feels like the restaurants gained from third-party delivery apps financially. And
If you're a restaurant and you don't want to participate, does that put you at enough of a competitive disadvantage you almost feel like you have to participate?
I don't think
No.
so. I mean, I don't know. I think that is a better question for the two restaurant owners, but nobody's obligated to participate. But and also Corvallis is really not that big. It's really not that hard. I think it was more of value to people during the pandemic to have curbside pickup and pick it up themselves because it's such a short distance than it was to have a third party delivery app. But that's again my opinion.
Morgan, what's your take?
Yeah, we didn't use any of it. Two Towns did those meal kit things, but they delivered their own stuff. And even that was just a way for us. The exposure via Two Towns was awesome, just to make people remember that we're here. It's difficult. It can be difficult to opt out because sometimes places will come around and say, take a photo of your menu, or someone types it up, and then all of a sudden you've got someone showing up with a Grubhub bag, picking up an order. You're like, oh, we don't do that. I had to be kind of persistent on a couple of those apps where I had to find out, get to them and say, take my stuff off. We can't, for us, we have such a tiny place that we don't have a kitchen big enough to do, even on Friday and Saturday nights now. If we don't answer the phone, it's because we're too busy to take it to go order. And because we have to provide a good experience for the people that are in-house. Michelle's right about the margins. So our margins are already thin. All the money, there's a bunch of little add-ons, add-on fees and stuff. The driver gets something. One part that's really difficult is that, so with our model where you order from the bartender takes in all the money and all the tips, but then at the end of the night, based on food sales and total sales, they tip out the kitchen and their host and their runner and all that. But when those delivery apps show up, you should very much tip your driver. But on our end, we get a 0 through the tip line, and the bartender has to tip out. I mean, we tip out based on a total amount of sales. So if the bartender didn't get tipped, now the bartender is paying out of their own money, essentially, whatever their percentage is towards the kitchen for having made that. And that's those kinds of things are the reason that for us, it did not work at all.
You're not participating at all then.
What's that? And participating?
You're not participating in these apps at all then.
We're not. And the couple of times that people would come through, we actively, I had to go and find our menu on a website and get to customer service and say, you need to take that off because we're not going to honor it. If someone shows up.
And anything to add before I move over to Greg?
No, I don't think so. I know that or I guess one thing that I know from a secondhand, Jeffrey Sawyer up at Bombs Away, he mid-pandemic had 4 of those apps running, and he did each of them on his own. It kept him going, but it's instead of making $1 on everything, you're making a nickel. You gotta do 99 transactions instead of 20 or something. And
that is a hardworking guy.
Yeah, and it's more about just staying in the public eye. We still exist. Don't forget about us is worth it, but it becomes advertising budget or something.
Hey, Greg, what's been your experience what's your experience? What's your take on all of it?
Same thing as Morgan. We never got into that. We got so busy sometimes that you take the phone off the hook because the kitchen isn't big enough to handle the volume. So you want to take care of your personnel and your customers that are on premise and on the premises, excuse me. And so, yeah, we never got into that either. And talking to other businesses that did it, you realize that the margin is taken away for the business. I mean, sometimes 30% of the cost, if you put out $10, or you're charging 10, but $3 of it goes to the app, and it's like, that's just, you're just throwing your money away, kind of thing. So yeah, we never got into that either. We just decided
just not good for a restaurant.
It wasn't for us. Now there are certain places that seem to like it and it works for them, but it didn't work for us. And especially a smaller kitchen, maybe the type of menu you have, maybe those are kind of things that make it worthwhile or not worthwhile. So, but yes, no, we didn't do it.
No. Michelle, seems like you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I wanted to add that even though we're talking about the restaurants, that those apps also don't really, the drivers don't hardly make anything. So when people think like, well, at least when I order the food, this local driver is making an income, that's not completely true. So for me during the pandemic, and I ended up in March, I got COVID and I had to take, some time off of work. Once I was back on my feet, it was financially a problem. I lost a lot of revenue by not working. So I started driving, thinking I was just going to be doing like humans, right? So on days there wasn't a lot of that, I clicked on the delivery part and I did it for one day. I delivered for Uber Eats. And I literally, between 2 humans in my car and 3 food deliveries alone, the total time I spent, almost 4 hours of my time, I made $25. So the drivers are not making money either. It's the app that's making the money, and people need to understand that. So, I mean, it's more valuable, I think, to support the restaurants directly. So the money directly goes to the restaurant. I mean, I've actually debated about starting my own delivery service, and I don't know what that would partake, but I wish I could do it and charge like 5% or whatever, and support all the bars and restaurants.
Make it worth it for the restaurants, huh?
Yeah, it needs to be for them and for me.
Seems
Or
like
pay
that
me
should
in
be the
food.
point. Yeah.
Pay me in food, Morgan. Greg.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess in a way I'm gonna go down to this question I've got over here. Out of the kind of trends that are going on in restauranting, if you will, what do you see as kind of hopeful? What do you see as disturbing a little bit, or potentially problematic? And Michelle, I think I'm going to kind of kick that one off with you, and then I'm going to move over to Greg, and then over to Morgan. Yeah. So Michelle, trends you're saying good and bad. Oh, you're muted. Oh, there you go.
There we go. So I don't know about trends wise in Corvallis itself, but there's a lot of jokes being made right now about trends in the idea of a speakeasy. Don't do it.
Don't do it. Okay.
But I also see like a lot of I think it's because probably, I'm guessing, because of the shortage on ingredients, there seems to be a huge overlap on menus. There's like a lot of places I see that their menus have shifted because they're working with what's available, and maybe it's not normally what they would normally do. Like the amount of restaurants now I'm seeing doing Taco Tuesday, it's like, wait, what? It's like, I don't know.
So you're saying those of us who are devotees of tacos, we're safe.
Well, as somebody who is, and my friend here that I'm staying with in Austin will tell you, I am a taco aficionado. Like he literally picked me up from the airport and greeted me with a taco gummy. It's a gummy candy, but it's shaped like a taco. And I have a taco tattoo on my back. So tacos are very important to my life. But there's very specific places I want to go get a taco. So I think that I realize people, and nobody on this panel, but I've seen other restaurants that seem to be desperate to bring people in and put butts in those chairs, that their menus are really like kind of all over the place. And I'm not sure that's a good pattern to follow, but I can see why they might be doing it. So I'm not judging.
Greg, I mean, kind of trends that you're seeing maybe upcoming the next few years in restaurants, positive and negative,
Um,
local or not?
well, I guess still seeing that the food end of things is becoming is stronger. Maybe the alcohol isn't quite as dominant as it was. People are, they're just not coming out as late as at night. You're seeing them stay a little closer to home, or they're going home earlier. And that to me is, I mean, you just got to figure out that you're going to have to make your money a little earlier in the evening, and that's going to be part of the new way, so to speak. So at least that's what I see in Corvallis right now. So and as Morgan said, maybe there's going to be a couple that pop up, because we have lost a few businesses, but the social atmosphere, you still want that to keep happening, and you want to promote that. But I think now it's going to be more of having, instead of having a few beers with your buddies, you go in and have a meal, and you maybe still have a beer with them, but instead of having 2 or 3, you have 1, but you have food. And so at least that's what I see on our end of it, in this part of town. So.
Yeah, and I'm going to kind of change the question a little bit as I move over to Morgan. We're getting a lot of viewers that are wondering, can we get a wider variety of cuisines in the community? Why are there not a wider, range of cuisines in the community? Is there any hope of that going on? And what do you think's missing in the community in terms of cuisines? Morgan, let me start with you.
Yeah, if we're talking like Corvallis specifically, I think Corvallis is so different than like Portland or something. If you could answer any of these questions in completely different ways, even with like the meal delivery stuff, totally different in Portland when you can't just park your car on the sidewalk and do your walk-in or whatever. What Michelle said about food trucks and minority-owned businesses getting support, I think would be phenomenal for Corvallis. We've got kind of one of everything, but like we don't have not even one of everything, there's some Thai food and some Chinese food and tacos and that kind of thing. But like if there's an Ethiopian place, someone point me to it, that kind of thing. I think supporting the minority owned businesses and food trucks, like there have been a handful that have popped up, like finally, thanks to like a lot of hard work Michelle put in years ago. And that would allow for so much diversity, I think. And also just I have no idea what it costs to like start or open a food truck, but I can imagine it's less than brick and mortar, and how many more people would have opportunities if we let those out there. I think for Corvallis, that would be just huge, just really, really huge.
And we did have a couple of questions about, are we seeing more people of color that are able to get into restauranting in the community? It sounds like really not so far, but food trucks might be a good entry point. So we need to loosen up the rules a bit. It sounds is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that, especially because like, yeah, if we can spread the rules from downtown even just out further, I think it would be an entry point. And there are also like, one thing I loved about the Corvallis Culinary Connections thing, we had like maybe the DCA or something, that there's a little bit of like, oh, what's downtown, but like what's in the rest of our town? How do I even find a new place to try? Like that was amazing. This in the CCC keeping up and stuff and continuing has been awesome. But that initial push of me realizing the places that we do have some kind of resource for that as well, or to find a way that we can pay Michelle to do that so we can get out further or find, you know, like she's tried a couple different organizations in town to like kind of umbrella, and that's been super valuable. Something like that I think would really go a long way.
So I can say, as somebody
to
that owns
diversity.
a news and information organization, yeah, it's always a struggle.
Yeah.
Michelle's feeling it too. Yeah, yeah. Okay, Michelle, you know, and I'm going to move over to Michelle really quickly if you can. Yeah, just the range of cuisines in Corvallis. I think folks feel there's not much range,
So I
and would like to see more.
So I guess my first question to the people that are saying that is, how far have you ventured? It's like, we have a Korean place downtown now next to Starbucks. How many people have been into that location? And there's also, I think there is some diversity in Corvallis, but sometimes people get stuck, you know, in their direction. Maybe they do just go downtown. One of my goals when I started Corvallis Culinary Connections was to reach out more to what I would call BIPOC owned establishments, most of those being Mexican restaurants. And I'd have conversations with them, but they didn't see the value in social media based on either their own cultural preference or language barrier. I'm not really sure. But that is something I'm going to continue doing, is that I do think there is more diversity in our restaurant scene, but maybe we're just not finding it. You know, maybe those voices aren't loud enough for us to see. But anybody thinking about starting a business in Corvallis, Corvallis is notorious for having high entrance costs, let's say. So if you wanted to open a brick and mortar, there's a process. And part of that process is to give the city of Corvallis a nice chunk of money for them to review your idea. And not a lot of people have that kind of money, and more so.
About how much money?
I mean, I don't have an exact number, but 10 years ago or more, when we had our food truck and we were looking at opening, a brick and mortar, I mean, it was in the, I'll say $25,000 range or something for. So here's the thing about Corvallis that I do know. If you could find a real estate location that has currently been used as a restaurant, you have an easier entrance point. But at the point that let's say, so let's take the former Cloud and Kelly's location. It's now belongs, Lucidine is using it, right? So if, let's say, Lucidine moves on and that location's available again, well, since it now had a gap where it was no longer a restaurant, you start from zero, you start over, and there's a cost to that. So what I think Corvallis lacks is locations that are affordable for anybody to open a restaurant. It's extremely
Is that
expensive.
the case everywhere, or is that unique to Corvallis? Like
I think
compared to
some of
Albany,
that's
how are we
unique to
doing?
Corvallis. Albany, let's just, okay. So every, I don't know if it's city or county, I'm not exactly sure, has financial opportunities to grow their community. Albany chose years ago to use that money to help small businesses, not just restaurants, but small businesses open up in their downtown and help them get started. And I don't have the exact information what they helped with, but I know that Albany chose to be more small business focused. From my understanding, Corvallis some money went to maybe larger businesses. And again, I don't want to get too quoted on that because I don't have exact numbers in front of me. And usually I don't like to speak unless I have my facts. So I guess what I'm saying is that my vision is that if Corvallis could open up the food cart ordinance past downtown I think it would be really beneficial to people that are thinking about starting a food-based business, but maybe lack the capital.
Yeah, and I'm going to kind of move on. And what I would like to do, we've got more questions than we're going to have time for. I'm going to try to get answers in 30 to 60 seconds from whoever wants to give them, rather than kind of going round robin here like what we have been. And then I guess the one I want to start with is, do you think the Corvallis should be keeping the outdoor seating currently available once COVID is kind of complete or done, if there is such a thing? But what the questioner wants to know, we've had a couple of questions like this. Should this continue, the outdoor dining, and then what impact does that have on parking and pedestrians? Morgan, let me start with you.
I absolutely love it. It honestly last summer put us in a position that we had twice as many seats as we normally do. And again, people were happy to wait an hour for a taco, but it like doubled the capacity of our restaurant, which was so helpful then, especially after we'd spent a year and a half with basically no revenue. But in the future, like if they would let us do it from like March through October or something, I mean, I'd pay my $100 permit or whatever, just like I do for my sidewalk cafe, just for like having seats on the actual sidewalk. There's kind of some talk of that, like a seasonal one that we could set up and tear it down. But I mean, on First Street, we only have parking on one side of the street, and we take up 3 of those spots, and we have no shortage of customers. Absolutely no shortage of customers.
Okay, and then Greg, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, same thing. I'm very positive on it. I feel like the customer response to and community response to having outside seating is they're looking at it as much more European, that this is going on in a lot of other places in the country, and other countries especially, and that it's always pretty well received. And that's what's happening here. They like the idea of being outside. They like the idea of having the open air kind of atmosphere. And so I would like to see it continue as well. So I think it's a very positive thing for the establishments and to me, just, and like Morgan said, the customers are coming in. People seem to be finding spots to park. We're still getting a lot of walk-in and a lot of bikers, and people are finding other ways to get around town, even riding the bus downtown. People do that a bunch, I know. So so I would encourage the city to continue this on, and I think it'll be a very positive response.
So I'm gonna ask you really quickly, Morgan, what are some of the largest barriers to getting locally sourced foods, farm to table, versus stuff from Cisco and so forth? Sounds like there's some barriers there. Are those starting to get better or worse? What's the biggest problem there?
Yeah, well, first of all, with us, we're right on the market. So as soon as the market opens up, we do a lot out of there, especially like pretty much any of our specials are based on what we found in the market for the moment, the week, or the month, or whatever. I really have not had more of an issue. We haven't done Cisco for probably like 2 years, but I don't see more of an issue like getting stuff from Van Vliet than anyone who got stuff from Cisco or some other bigger, wider company. It might be a tiny bit more expensive, but like we try to swap out the beef burger we use now. We get it from Van Vliet. It's like Northwest meat. I don't know if it's grass fed all the time, but it's, at least finished, and it's really good. We tried out some other burger patties from one of our other distributors, and we got to say it's something like 20 cents per patty. But what we get that's local or is so good. Like the fish we get straight out of the farmer's market is like never even frozen. Sometimes it's caught within like 24 hours. And I really don't think we've had more trouble getting the more local stuff than anybody did with like stuff coming from across country. Maybe even easier because it was right here and you didn't have to wait for it to truck. But I don't think that was really any harder than just getting anything in general.
And then, Greg, kind of what's, I'll move to you about this. In Corvallis, and I don't know if you have awareness about this, are you seeing that there are getting to be in the industry more or less women that are in management positions or they're chefs? Do you have awareness about that?
I guess I don't really. I know, I watched Morgan, go through her growth. A lot of places there's couples that have done it. So there's a woman direction there as well. But yeah, I haven't quite seen it per se.
Okay, so Morgan, do you think that's getting better, or what are you
For
seeing?
women in the industry in general, or
Yeah.
like specifically in the kitchen?
Well, either in the kitchen or the industry in general. How many are getting management and chef jobs?
Yeah. Man, we're so small. For 1 minute in our kitchen, like, I don't know, about a year ago, we had more women than men cooking, and that, if you want to get stereotypical about it, in a home, women have more of those domestic type duties, but in restaurants, it is men. And there might be something to be said that I'm noticing a trend in the industry of, it's not just a bunch of grumpy people throwing pans back there and being real salty. We are more supporting people that give their love and their positive energy, or maybe just in the restaurants I've worked in the last decade or so, and that women don't have to compete with that energy and that fight your way to the top kind of thing. So I don't know that I necessarily see a lot more, but I do feel like the environment is changing a bit. I honestly don't even know if I really answered that question, but I don't know if I specifically see that, more women necessarily.
No, that's a fair answer.
Yeah,
That's a fair
Michelle might
answer.
have a bigger answer based on the fact that she worked with talked to so many people in town, versus I've got like my little micro.
Yeah, Michelle, I mean, do you know? What's your experience?
I do think that the number of women is potentially growing, as well as minorities, but we also have quite a few restaurants that women have always been involved, but they're not like raising their hand like, hey, take notice, I'm a woman, I'm doing this. It's like they're just doing their restaurant. Like Little Morocco is a great example. It's a great little Moroccan based delicious food,
Love it.
and it's owned by a woman. Her husband helps her run it. She's from Morocco, he's American. So there's a lot of those couples out there. You look at the Bear Library, it's also a couple running it. He happens to be Black, identifies as Black. He's also a veteran. You have Kimber, who owns Magenta and Ali Euros. She's been in our community forever and probably one of the first powerful women restaurant owners in this town. So there is some of them have always been there, but they haven't felt the need to speak up and have acknowledgement just for being women. They're just determined to run their business and make delicious food. So, but I do think it is growing, at least in acknowledgement by the consumer. Consumers are asking more about businesses.
So one last question for all of you, and then we'll hang out to the all clear so we can talk after we're off camera. So one last question real quick from each of you. So one, what is that, what is it that most diners maybe don't know that would enhance their experience in a restaurant? What do restaurant staffs generally wish diners knew? Greg, let me start with you.
I don't know. I guess the staff would like the consumer to figure out what the routine is. And as Morgan had said earlier, everybody's using credit cards now. until COVID, I never took credit cards. So it's been a new ball game for me. It's created anyway. So that's been a big deal, and just getting the consumer to figure out, what's the procedure for ordering. How do you let them know, where to go? Where are you going to sit? And how can we find you? Like, we're using a number system now, which we never used before. And then also trying to get people, if they do tell you where they're going to sit, to not move, stay put. So, so when the kitchen brings out the food, they can go to where they were told to go, and that you'll be there. So it's just kind of, to me, it's just kind of getting to know the system and the routine of each place, and there you go. So
Morgan, kind of just what can a diner do to kind of enhance their experience and your experience when they're out to eat? What do staffs wish they knew?
That's, yeah, what Greg said about procedures. I get that every place you go, it's different, but also we will help you. Like ask. We are people pleasers. Like, we are in the service industry. We love to help, like, to our own detriment. So if you're not sure, ask. There are lovely people that want to help. We might look frazzled, but that's something else too, is like, we have been really decimated, and the people that are still here are working so hard. It like makes me want to cry. I am so proud of how hard my staff works. The other night we were trying to piece some staff together because someone was sick and someone else was out at last notice, and it was going to be our head chef and me in the kitchen on a Friday night. And then we got like one of our hosts to like try the salad line because they'd worked at Jimmy John's, and we couldn't do it. We 15 minutes, literally 15 minutes into us being like, oh, we'll try dinner service. We'll see if we can get through. I was like, this is going to be a disaster. This is not going to be good customer experience. And then there was a joke made a little later that, like, sometimes our line cooks devalue what they do. You could throw a literal rocket scientist in there and they could not keep up with the line on a Friday night. So, we all play to our strengths. Like, that's just something in life in general. But I think customers have become so gracious over COVID that, like, that has been just light years. Like, it's so, I'm almost get embarrassed when people are thanking us so much or being so gracious. Like, that is something I did not expect to come out of COVID. I expected people throwing tantrums, and it has been the complete opposite. Maybe in Corvallis, and it's not the same everywhere, but that is something that actually already did happen, and we are so grateful for. We are so grateful for the patience and understanding that maybe just this light was shed on our industry during COVID that never was before. So yeah, I think you're kind of figuring it out. We're grateful to be here, and we are so grateful for all of you.
Thank you, Morgan. Michelle, I'll move over to you. Things folks can do to enhance their own experience as diners. And then just kind of what does restaurant staff generally wish diners understood or knew?
So coming from more of the media direction, I would say that for diners, when they have an exquisite experience or interaction with somebody, freaking post it on social media. It's free marketing. Like, it literally is letting people know that, like, oh my God, that lamb burger at Brass Monkey right now is freaking bomb, because it is. Like, and tell people, share that information. And in the opposite, if you had not a great experience at a restaurant, before you blast it all over social media, freaking reach out to the restaurant. Like, ask them or explain to them, here's the situation I had, because there's probably a valid reason why this situation happened. And I'll guarantee you they're going to try to make it right. And so, like with Corvallis Culinary Connections, I moderate all the posts. And when people try to give out this rant experience that they had one time, and a lot of times they'll say, like, every time it's been great, but this one time, and they're going to go on about it, I don't let them post. And I don't care if they think that I'm not supporting free speech, because I'm saying, give your speech to the restaurant, allow them to make a correction, give them the moment to make it right before you go all over social media saying how bad it was. But again, I think social media is a tool also for the restaurants. And I've tried to reach out to as many as possible. I'm always there for them. I've never charged for my social media services because I don't think that's right. But as we get to the end of the pandemic, yes, I am looking for sponsors.
So, and I want to say, you've been generous with your time here, knowing that you were traveling today. So thank you so much for your time. And I know with how everything you do in the community, how busy you are. Greg running Squirrels, Morgan running Brass Monkey, always very, very busy work. I know you folks put in the hours. And just really appreciate you showing up this evening. Thank you all. Emily.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. And also, we of course want to extend a big thanks to our Corvallis Advocate staff and all of the work they do behind the scenes that make these CitySpeak town halls possible. And again, thanks to Peeps Sports and First Alternative Natural Foods Co-op for helping to make this series possible. Also, we can't do these forums without help from viewers like you, so please do subscribe if you haven't already. And again, our next CitySpeak, focused on OSU's forests, is set for June 7th, another Tuesday at 6:30 p.m.